I think that Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Sheila Caldwell. I serve as the Vice President for Anti-Racism, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Southern Illinois University System. And we're very pleased that we're still committed to DEI here at SIU. And we're very pleased to also invite you to our conversation of understanding today, a culture of care and action, lessons from SIU student success leaders. It is exciting, very exciting to have our ADEI Lifetime Achievement Award honorees with us today. They have been recognized for their extraordinary leadership in advancing student success, fostering a culture of care, and ensuring that every student has the opportunity to thrive across SIU campuses. Today's panel will provide us with the opportunity to explore lessons learned, strategies that work, and the future of advising and student success at SIU. So first, I would like to introduce our very own Dr. Father Joseph Brown. He is our inaugural 2023 ADEI Lifetime Achievement Award winner for the SIU Carbondale campus. And along with him, we have also our inaugural award winner, Dr. Earlene Patterson, 2023 ADEI Lifetime Achievement Award winner. And Dr. Randy Burnside is the Dr. McNeese 2025 ADEI Lifetime Achievement Award winner. And it's important to note that in 2024, SIU Board of Trustees acknowledged that we should honor Dr. Wesley Robinson McNeese for his years of service at the SIU School of Medicine. So we're very pleased that we now have this award in his honor. Before I turn it over to the panelists, we're talking about a culture of care. But if I can say this, when we started this award, we said, who are the people across campus, and I'm going to use this word, who love students well, who love students deeply. And these are the people who are on this screen right now. They have sacrificed, they have committed to student success. And again, we are very honored to have you all here today representing your campuses, representing yourselves and SIU in a very possible way. So these are the people who I admire, who I look up to, who are the sages on our campuses. So I think we are not just in for a treat, but we can listen to their words, we can trust their words because they have modeled student success, they have modeled advising, and not only that, they're going to be able to share about the fruit of the work and the success of the work. And so again, please pay attention because it gets no better than the people who are here today. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Father Brown. If you could just share a little bit more about your area as far as years of service and what you teach and instruct on SIU Carbondale.
Thank you. This is a very good opportunity, and we appreciate your being able to put this together in such a coherent and effective manner. I have been at Southern Illinois University Carbondale campus since 1997. I came here to be the director of the Black American Studies minor, which was probably the only minor in the country that offered tenure to faculty, even though no one had ever gotten it between 1969 and 1997. And I decided that we were going to have a major and pushed up against a really rough side of the mountain. And we got that in 2010. And I have been teaching across the board because when I came here, I thought that I needed to add classes that other people could come here and teach. So I've taught the African American literature classes, film classes, theater classes, and I'm teaching now the spirituals and the slave narratives as the foundations for how our ancestors developed liberation strategies. And so between that focus of foundational work, I also make sure every semester I get students to be thinking about where we came from, where we are, and what are the critical issues they need to be dealing with.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your years of service and for teaching our students. Dr. Patterson.
Thank you as well, Dr. Caldwell, for pulling us together to talk about these very important concerns as they relate to our very important customers, our students. I've been here at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, since 1990. I can't believe it's been that long. And I still have a passion and a strong heart for the work that we do. I initially came as an academic advisor, and so um, I have an empathy and a passion for that level of work that academic advisors provide, boots on the ground service to particularly first year transitioning students, students that are coming in from high school, and students who are finding their way as freshmen, first year college students. Watching their journey has been quite a journey for me, one that I never tire of, one that I'm still excited about. I currently serve as the Associate Vice Chancellor for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and happy to be a part of this team.
Excellent. And yeah, thank you for, as we talk about development with student development, also professional development, academic advisor, and now the lead person on SIUE teaching others how to help students foster academic success and excellence. So thank you for being an example in many ways, especially that way. I think many people can look up to you and see that career trajectory. So appreciate that. And last but not least, Dr. Burnside.
Thank you for having me be a part of this today. I get to be a part of this with two people I admire greatly and have learned a lot from being a part of the system now in my 21st year and really respect the work that they have done and continue to do. And hopefully I can continue to do with them. And so, like I said, I'm in my 21st year. I started out here as an assistant professor in political science in 2005. Got tenured in that department of the first person of color to be tenured in the Department of Political Science at SIUC. Went on to become the director of the Master of Public Administration program in that department, where we again rebuilt that program. Moved from there, did some work in the provost office as a deputy associate provost for a couple of years. And then I got the unique opportunity to join the SIU School of Medicine. And this is my 6th year. For the last 5 or so years, I've been here at SIU School of Medicine as the director of Med Prep, which is the nationally renowned post-baccalaureate program that has helped create so many underrepresented doctors and dentists across the country. And so it's my great pleasure to be here today to be able to discuss how advising students and creating a culture of care around that is so vitally important, especially as we move forward in the societal, I'll just say it that way, environment that we find ourselves in currently.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, and that's a great segue into our conversation. We've heard just some stories here briefly. We got pioneers, we got trailblazers, and we got OGs for you today. So these are the people, as we heard, their years of service. So again, very, very excited. I want to start out before we dive into our conversation. For those of you who have joined on the YouTube channel, this is recorded. This will be uploaded again for further professional development. So we encourage you to revisit this conversation. But also, if you have questions for our experts today, I would welcome you to put those questions in the chat, and we will allocate 10 to 15 minutes to responding to your questions. So as you hear different topics discussed today and you want to unpack some of those ideas and concepts further, please feel free again to put those questions in the chat. We're going to reserve time for that. And so now I would like to dive into our conversation, and I would like to start the first question with Father Brown. And this is for all of our panelists who have joined today. As ADEI Lifetime Achievement Award honorees, how do you define a culture of care in the context of student success? And what does that look like in practice? If you could tell us, what does that concept mean to you, and how have you been able to execute student success across your campus?
I don't think that we should ever assume anything before we get the information from the person we're working with. The culture of care says to refer to one of the greatest interviews I've ever heard on public radio, Ruby Sales and her famous interview with Krista Tippett about Where does it hurt? And if you ask the students the questions, how are you? Where are you coming from? Tell me something about you before you start to assume something. The worst thing we can do for every targeted group in this country is making assumptions. So the culture of care is, I need to know who you are, why you're doing what you're doing. And if you need me to be with you in that, let's figure out a way that can be effective and not insulting. That's how I look at the culture of care. But it's got to be about the total person. And that's something that I know we were going to talk about this a lot during this conversation, but I'm not sure that most schools are set up and prioritize how you look at the total person. We have all sorts of great professionals doing all sorts of wonderful things, but we tend to think of, well, they're here, we got to get them prepared to get out into the quote real world. Well, nowadays, I think that when you've got school shootings across the country, when you've got all this other stuff going on, and when you've got 7-year-olds who know more than some 70-year-olds do about what's going on around them, I don't know what the real world is except the one you're living in. So I'm just going to assume that everybody I see is living in the real world and is bringing something with them. I got to ask and find out what it is. That's how I do. That's how I would look about that. And in practice, that's what I would say. Stop and listen and think about it before you ever say, well, I've got an answer for you, because I don't even know what your questions are.
Excellent. Yeah, being more curious and certain. Dr. Patterson.
I think that is so powerful, Father Brown. Um, and what I would add to that in the context of culture of care is that it's also an institutional mindset. A set of practices where every student feels valued and supported and is not just known as a learner or
Mm,
a data point, but a whole person. The institutional mindset is what fosters a community of support and a sense of belonging, and it helps students in their personal growth, their academic success, their personal development. And these are the things that ultimately impacts the student's experience and their persistence and their retention and their graduation. Um, Culture of care also refers to services that are accessible, and services that are responsive and meet students where they are. We recognize that our students are coming into the university from all different backgrounds and levels of preparedness. A student may come in who is struggling with juggling work and school. Someone else may be, we were talking about this earlier, someone else may be food insecure. Someone else may be struggling with mental health challenges. Um, it's our responsibility to connect our students with the appropriate resources to their situations and what is happening in their life at that moment. And depending on the situation in the context of academic advising, we may need to meet 2 or 3 more times before we even get to the point of talking about academic advising for the next semester. What that could mean in practice is that when a student is asking for support, we do our best to provide that support, even if we don't have the answer ourselves. An example
mm-hmm.
might be a student comes in to their academic advising meeting and says that they have a bill. They don't understand this bill. Um, we don't just send them to another office. We help them navigate our CougarNet system to find their bill. Then we help them understand what they're looking at. And then we might help them come up with a list of questions to ask when they go over to the financial aid office. It's meeting students where they are, and it's not just about what you may have had in mind for that appointment. what do they need?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So I heard relationship building. I heard institutional mindset. I heard accessible and responsive resources and services. And with that, you have to be equipped as a leader and as an advisor and specialist to know those things. And you have to care enough, right, to be able to ask the right questions, as Father Brown talked about, and to really dive in. So we're getting some very mindset principles as well as action principles. Thank you for that. Dr. Burnside.
Okay, so all of what they said, which is a lot of what I was thinking, but I will add just a couple of things so that we can continue the conversation because I think they have really nailed that particular topic. But when I define it, I think about a few things. When students feel seen, heard, respected, and psychologically safe, they persist and graduate. And so the institution is responsible for students feeling seen, being heard, being respected, and especially feeling psychologically safe. The institution is responsible for that because, as Dr. Patterson alluded to, and as Father Brown alluded to, when the institution provides those things, students persist to graduation. That's what I see as a culture of care. When the institution can provide those things for students, you see greater success.
Absolutely. And Dr. Burnside, you being in the School of Medicine, I know that you all teach about that a lot as it relates to a culture of care. But for those of our listeners who might be hearing that term psychologically safe for one of the first times, can you unpack that a little bit? How do you define that? How does that relate to student success? Psychological safety.
Well, I think, we talk about microaggressions all the time, and that's one of the things we like to talk about when we talk about that. When students do not feel, so there are groups of students who do not feel like they belong in these spaces, even though they come to these spaces, right? We could be talking about underrepresented students. We can be talking about under-resourced students, as Dr. Patterson so adequately pointed out. So we can talk about underrepresented, under-resourced, underprepared. So when those types of students come into these spaces, they oftentimes will feel like they don't belong in these spaces. And so if we start to treat them in a way that attacks their their mental well-being, meaning that we in some ways agree with them by our actions that they don't belong in these spaces, then they're going to not feel comfortable. They're not going to engage. They're going to withdraw. And so that's going to create a psychologically unsafe space for them, right? Where their greatest fears are being realized because the people that they're going to for help and the people that they should be respecting are confirming those fears that they may bring into those spaces. So what we want to try to do is create an environment where we help them dispel those fears, where we help them grow and mature individually into better humans, into better students, right? So that's what that's what we should be trying to do, right? And that's what we're talking about. We talk about psychological safety. We want to embrace them. We want to wrap that care around them, not confirm some of the doubts and fears that they may come into the space with. And I think oftentimes we don't think about young people having those doubts and fears when they come into these spaces. We go, well, they should be prepared for this. They should be ready for this. When they get into this space, they should be ready to go. They know what college is. And oftentimes they don't know what college is. They were told that they need to go to it and to do it, but they don't really know what that entails. And so I think making sure that we're creating these psychologically safe spaces for them is paramount to their persistence.
No, absolutely. And I would like to follow with that. You talked about psychological safety as importance. I also heard affirmation, right? But if in addition to that, can you share what are some other powerful advising strategies that you've employed for helping students navigate barriers while also maintaining high expectations? A lot of times when we talk about supporting students, people think we're lowering expectations, but how do you help students navigate while maintaining high expectations?
So I think for me, over time, I've seen a lot of advising and participated in a lot of advising in many varied forms. So for me, I think in the position I'm in now, in a supervisory position and leading people and having people to advise students, I use what we call here an enriched approach, and I think it's often used, and I think Dr. Patterson has referred to some of the stuff I'm about to talk about already earlier when she was talking about it. But I use what I call the enriched strategy, because we should be enriching students' lives, right? And so if you think about how enrich is spelled, it's ENRICH, right? So if we talk about the A, we're talking about we have to engage students where they are, right? We have to engage them where they are, not where we think they should be, where they are, because we let them in where they are, not where we think they should be. So when we open our doors and we let them in, we let them in where they are. And they come from a lot of different places with varied backgrounds and varied expertise, right? So we have to engage them where they are. We have to nurture them by providing them with personalized advisement, because all of our students are different. Again, they come from many different spaces, many different backgrounds, urban, rural, suburban, you name it. We get those students, right? International, we get all types of students. So we have to nurture them by providing them personalized advisement for them specifically. We also have to respect them as equal partners in their educational process. Oftentimes we sit and want to dictate to students, this is what you should be doing. You do this, and then you do this next, and you do this. But we need to respect them as equal partners in this educational process, meaning we need to engage them in conversations about what their dreams are, what their goals are, and what they want to accomplish, as opposed to telling them what they can have or what they can't have, right? So we need to respect them as individuals, as students, but I think, as Dr. Patterson said early, as consumers, as clients, as customers, right? We need to respect them. We also need to inspire them. And I know Father Brown does a great job of inspiring students. I've seen him do it so often, as well as I've heard about Dr. Patterson doing it as well. But we need to inspire them to hold fast to their dreams, but also inspire them to do the work that's required for them to have their dreams. So we need to inspire them to have dreams, but also do the work that's required for them to have those dreams. And then celebrate those small accomplishments that they have, because that's going to help them to build their confidence and their self-esteem and continue to move forward. We have to, part of our job is inspirational, in my opinion. And if you would have asked me this 30 odd years ago when I got into higher ed, I would not have believed that. 25 years ago, I would not have believed that. But I have come to see how important that is, especially to our student population, that we have to inspire them. And part of that is encouraging them, supporting them, and celebrating those small successes with them. And finally, but most importantly, we have to hold them accountable, because accountability is very important. We have to hold ourselves accountable, but we also have to hold them accountable for their successes and failures. It's a shared partnership. We share in the success, we also share in the failure. And we have to get students to understand that part of it, because in that understanding becomes growth and maturity and ultimate success. So that's really our approach to how we go about advising students.
Excellent. Thank you for that acronym and for those powerful words. And just in case you missed it, we have the word enrich, engage, nurture, respect, inspire, celebrate, and hold accountable. Thank you so much. That is a wonderful model for us to imitate. And with that, I'm going to ask Father Brown. We've heard about just some of the strategies employed at the School of Medicine. If you could tell us at Carbondale, what interventions have you found to be most effective in boosting year-to-year persistence? People might not know we pay attention to how students move through our system and are they being successful. So can you talk about year-to-year persistence with respect to retention rates, particularly as we talk about our historically underserved students? And those could be African American, first generation, Pell eligible students, rural students. How are we serving those students and making sure that not only do they come, but that they complete?
Well, I want to say that the listing that Dr. Burnside just gave us should be universally applicable, and it should be the way the priorities are set up. I have do things in slogan manners, and I've been telling people at all sorts of mandatory conferences on our campus for the last 25 years, teach the students in front of you, not the ones you went to school with. But I also tell all my students, everybody, to ask the question every day, who defines the terms by which you live? And once we can start getting them to ask those questions, we can start to get some real successful things there. But I think when you talk about what are the initiatives that has seen the strongest impact, um, we are struggling at SIU Carbondale because we have been fortunate through your efforts and other people's efforts to be bringing in students through Hope Chicago and some other programs, but we don't have a sufficient number of advisors, and they're not organized in a way that they can complement and support each other the most effectively. So it comes down to the ones who are doing the work have to do exactly what Dr. Burnside said. And I know that it's personal. There are students who are former students, alumni, who are probably in their 40s and 50s, who will still go around and sing the praises of some of the advisors they had 25 or 30 years ago because they set them down and had a personal relationship with them. It's what we all three of us have been talking about so far today. And what's successful? Exactly what we have said. The people that I know who get those students to come back are the ones who say, I care about you enough that I'm going to call you. I just did that this morning to two students right after I came home from the grade school event I was at and said, I haven't seen you the last two classes. Do we need to talk? Mm. Well, and one of them wrote right back and said, yeah, when can we talk? I already knew that. After all these years, my reflexes are well trained. But if I'm supposed, it's kind of like in healthcare all over the place. If one doctor has to see 25 or 30 patients in one day, they can't do anything. So if one advisor is responsible for 50 or 60 students, somebody's going to be missing an awful lot of information because it's going to be transactional and pretty much by the book, and we're going to do this, going to do this, going to do this. But the whole notion of I've got to find out who you are, and we have some incredible advisors on this campus doing that. But is it the policy and the procedure that is been lifted up and made special and privileged? I don't think so right now because we've got to keep them in school. Well, I don't know what's stopping them from being in school. And that's exactly what my colleagues on this panel have been saying so far. If we don't know what your problem is, I can't give you the good advice about it. And why do you want to drop out of school? And I think basically one of the most basic questions that the faculty, not only do we have great student advisors in these special programs with these students that you're talking about, but the other thing that is so important are the student peer mentors. I did this, I survived, I came back. Let me tell you, because I know what you're going through. They're not going to come to an 80-year-old and say, can you tell me what I need to be doing? As quickly as they're going to be going to a 21-year-old or 22-year-old. And we've had on this campus the history of programs that were united in academic and non-academic advising with trained credentialed professionals at the top of it, graduate student assistants, and undergraduate peer mentors. That's what is always going to be the most successful. And we've got that going on now with student success programs here on campus, but I'm afraid that they're not fully staffed and not fully complemented. But I know that we've got to have all of that. It's got to be a complete package, a community, a circle of support. Somebody like me, somebody who's been through it all, and somebody who knows exactly what the best strategies are. So you got to have a team. I guess that's the simplest way for me to put that. The team that makes it successful. And I see that because all I need to do is send a note to somebody in one of these programs that are bringing these at-risk students in here. Now, the biggest problem we have to have is how do we get that success translated into a conversation with faculty and some technical administrators on the staff who may only be thinking about how many people do I have to see today, and how come you didn't do the job, or the requirement or the assignment that I sent to you. I just don't know, and it's up to you to solve your problems. We've got to be able to use the examples of who's successful and make that exemplary to other people to understand that they've got to be accountable also, to use that word that I thought was so important in this conversation.
Excellent. Now we can always count on you to keep it real. So I appreciate you sharing those nuggets as far as true interventions, but also highlighting like these are some real issues that are keeping us from seeing even greater success. And we need to pay attention to that because you're also telling us like these are the ways we need to solve problems as well as help our advisors, right? Because again, they got to be practical. If we're talking about a culture of care, how realistic is it to care for 50, 60, 100 students? And oftentimes their loads might be even greater than that. But again, we're trying to think about what are the most effective ways that we can do this work, supporting our students and also supporting the people who support our students.
Yes.
And I know that they do that really well at Edwardsville. So Dr. Patterson, if you could chime in and tell us what are some student success initiatives that you have implemented and observed to have the strongest impact on SIU retention rates. And I'm looking forward to hearing this because I know you got some exciting news to share with
Yes.
everybody. So if you could tell us what you all have done so well across SIUE campus.
I'd be happy to share. We are particularly excited about several of our programs, um, namely the BSE, which is our Boundless Scholar Experience program. We're excited about our Summer Success program. We're excited about Codes. Codes is our new community-oriented digital engagement program. These are programs that have impacted our student retention. In particular, the BSC program, the Boundless Scholar Experience, um, we're particularly proud of. It's a program that at one time was very small in terms of scope. That program proved to be a very successful um, journey for incoming freshmen as they persisted to graduation. And it appeared that at that time it was about two sections of those students, 25 students per section. And it was a African American literature course that had a lot of great pedagogy for first year students. And again, it started very small, but those students were tracking towards their persistence and their graduation like none other. As it were, Dr. Miner arrived, and for those who know him, know he's very data driven, began to look at the data and the success of the students who were participants in that small group. And it was at that point, upon his arrival, expanded from two sections to now we have 14 sections of sometimes 40 and 50 and upwards in numbers of students in each of the 14 sections. These are underrepresented students who are first year students at our institution. The faculty who teach in the BSc program, they're African American literature faculty through our English department, led by the distinguished research professor, Dr. Howard Ramsey. Um, they've really played a key role in fostering a sense of community and helping us to expose students to our resources and connecting students with the support that they need. Um, these efforts have made a major difference in our retention. There's the codes is very important. It's an alternative general education curriculum that works with all majors and all programs here at SIUE, and it takes their education beyond the walls of the classroom and into the St. Louis region while doing research and working closely with faculty and the community. And it's also a scholarship for students who are Pell eligible. So it's a very unique undergraduate experience for our students. So that's been very important. Father Brown was talking about the importance of peer tutoring and peer mentoring. That has positively impacted our student retention. Students are more likely to be retained where they feel seen and heard, as Dr. Burnside just said, and when they have models of success, not only from professional staff and faculty, but especially amongst their peers. And we have a very intentional and intrusive advising and outreach support. Um, as a part of BSE, all of our incoming students meet with their first year academic advisors for an individual at the beginning of the journey here. At the very beginning, they have their own individual orientation session where we talk about the expectations of this particular institution and what that's going to mean for their success. We do hard scheduling for the academic advising, some of the practical things that we do. We don't wait for students to make appointments. We'll make the appointment for you. We know when you have classes and when you don't. So we'll make that appointment for you and make sure that you're here. Our academic intervention is very intentional. We have success coaching. We've just expanded our team of success coaches. That's making a world of difference. A very critical piece is our early warning and support system for first year students. That's where faculty are providing academic advising staff with information regarding students' progress very early in the semester. We have a program called GRASP, which is our Grade Recovery and Academic Sustainability Program. It's an intrusive and intensive support for students that are on academic probation. We can go on. We've got Collegiate 100 advising, where we focus on our African American males. We have something called Spill the Tea, where it's just for African American females. And it's led by some very dynamic people here. Dr. Kelly Atkins initiated Spill the Tea, and it has become something that students look forward to. They meet once a month and they spill the tea. We have a retention plan. It's a very dynamic and evolving plan that engages and supports our students as we get information in the early warning systems. We partner with our parents and other supporters that are part of the village. So it's a very expansive effort, but we also include our internal partnerships with Access, our counseling services, university housing, our dean of students office, our financial aid office. All of these collaborations are important to student success and retention, and then our advocacy for the care and the cultivation of supporting underrepresented and marginalized students. That's who we are and what we do. Some of the critical feedback is that we still need more of our faculty to participate in that early warning system, raising flags early enough to really inform our advising team and our success coaches um, as early as possible in knowing what we need to be able to help students connect with resources. So I could go on and on, but that's a little bit about how we have moved the retention needle.
No, absolutely. You gave us a mouthful and very powerful strategies. I heard vision, I heard team, and I heard a lot of strategy, right? Proactive strategy. as well. And I would like to say that all of those efforts have culminated into SIUE closing the institutional equity gap, because it's not an individual, it's an institutional equity gap for Black and white students. That first year retention rate is now at about 81% for Black and white students. And I want to say that's so significant, because if you look across not just our state, but our nation, very few institutions have achieved that type of milestone. So I just want to say bravo to you and your team, and just to SIU. And I also just want to acknowledge Chancellor Minor's vision, coming in with an asset-based approach mindset, right? Oftentimes people look at these issues from where our students are lacking, but you all looked at a program that was very successful and said, how do we scale that program? Not like, let's look at what's lacking, let's look at what's working, and then let's do more of that. And so now you have 7 times, you did a 7 times scale multiplier. You're talking 2 sections, now there are 14 sections. And that in itself is not just vision, that's a lot of work, that's a lot of effort. So again, you all are a national model for success. So thank you for sharing that. And again, we're able to see the fruit of all of that hard work and effort across the SIUE team. So not, again, your leadership, Chancellor Minor, Dr. Harris, just everyone that you mentioned, and even more people that we can't mention, just amazing work. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go back and look at this.
Dr. Caldwell, I wanna underline 3 things that
Please
she
do.
said that are so important because they fit into some of my long time experience. The first one is that this is an African American literature class. That teaches them not only to learn how to read and write, but to think in terms of their culture and hear the voices of people who can help them learn how to speak their own reality. That's one thing. Well, what are they? That's not going to help them get a job. Yes, it is. It's going to help them think and be. That's that psychologically safe space that Dr. Burnside was talking about. The literature class is absolutely essential. Learning how to read and write. That's one thing. The second thing was involving the parents, because one of the very first get rid of the gap in retention rates was the one that I helped to establish at the University of Virginia way back in 1986. And that had a Black Parents Advisory Group, because the other questions that I know you're going to ask us about family background and some of the crises.
Mhm.
And if we don't know what their family situation is your mother incarcerated?
Mhm.
Have you, is your father not able to help because of some illness or something? We just have these stereotypes that we presume. But the Black, and the other part of it is when they get these Pell Grants and these other loans and everything else, and their first generation, no matter what their ethnic or cultural background might be, do their parents actually know that they're not sending them here to help support them, but they're coming here to support themselves?
Mm.
Because sometimes the students are using that money to help raise their own families. And we need to know those kinds of things, but the parents need to know what it means. And if they're the first generation students, we have an obligation to involve their parents in learning what college is also. Those 2 things I think are extremely important. And then the third thing always has to be, do we have enough people being trained as faculty? Those 3 things I think are going to be a whole lot of increasing retention and success rates, because that's where it is. So I just had to just kind of, take the privilege of being an ancient person and say that.
No, yeah, that was exactly right on time. And one of the things that you said, as far as getting more faculty, having parents involved, having culturally responsive pedagogy, right? African Americans seeing themselves in the literature, having African American scholars. And one of the data points I want to introduce when we look at some of these disparities that we don't talk about enough, that is proven in the literature, is that students do better when they have teachers who reflect their demographic background, right? And so if we could say the opposite, if we look at the academy, we know that we have a lot of white professors, we have Asian professors represented, and then we have African Americans who we're trying to get more. But one of the reasons why certain populations do so well is because they have representation of that population, right? In the academy, it's not about natural intellectual abilities. The data shows that when you see people who look like you can imagine that you can do certain things, right? And so the more we get African American, Latino, Asian, and again, maintaining white professors, we're going to see more success. But where those gaps are lacking, we need to increase that, because we know that lacking has a direct impact on student success for our underrepresented, underserved students. So I appreciate you all highlighting that, and also problem solving for that as well. We're going to take about 5 more minutes worth of questions. And for those of you who are hanging in hanging in there with us on System YouTube, getting all of this rich information, I would encourage you to ask questions, and we're going to get to those questions in 5 minutes. And before we close out, we've talked a great deal about strategy. We've heard, in Rich, we've heard very specific things from SIUE as well as Carbondale, and things we have in common, such as peer support, such as African-American courses, such as a culture of care, like not making assumptions, talking to students. We heard that from Dr. Burnside, from Dr. Patterson, from Father Brown. So I want to my last question, I would like to talk about policy and some of the changes, because you all talked about, here are some of the issues. And so Dr. Burnside, I would like to start with you. From your perspective, if you're thinking about this broadly, what policy or structural changes, and we talk about structural changes, I mean, let's look at the registration policy. Let's talk about financial barriers. We heard that could be an issue, and we know that's the issue. Course scheduling. If we think about these changes, what are some of the things that we need to improve upon to promote better student success outcomes? Randy, you're on mute.
I'm going to say something, and it might upset some people at the institution, but we need to get rid of the finishing 4 terminology. That finishing 4 terminology, we need to get rid of that, because it is oppressive to students, because it forces them into a one-size-fits-all. You got to finish college in 4 years. And we understand students coming to our institution may not be at a preparedness level to finish in 4 years and have in a way that's going to allow them to be successful. So by pushing finish in 4, we're losing them in 2. You understand what I just said? By pushing finishing in 4, we're losing some of them in 2.
Amen.
Right? And so I think that's I think as an institution, that's we can internally think about that and how we can enhance that, but that's not something we should be promoting publicly. Finish in 4, finish in 4. You hear it all the time, yet we're accepting students who are not prepared to finish in 4. That's number one. That's possible. The second thing I think in terms of some of the things we need to think about is we need to make sure that we have culturally sensitive and curricularly trained, I hope I said that right, advisors. Culturally sensitive and curricular trained advisors. We need to give advisors the training that they need to be successful. Because we have to understand, oftentimes the point of the spear for retention is advising. Mm-hmm. Because if we do not take a realistic approach to how we advise students to take courses, they end up on probation and they end up out of the institution. So we need to ensure, we don't need to just blame advisors for not doing a good job. We need to also train them so that we can then hold them accountable, because we know how they're trained. We know who we're putting in these positions, and we know they have the tools and resources to do the job that we're asking them to do. Oftentimes advisors are blamed for stuff that they have not been trained for. And so we need to train, not blame, okay? I think from that standpoint, in terms of financial barriers, right? We really, in the environment that we're in, we really need to think about, I'd like what Dr. Patterson said about having those scholarships for students going back into the community and working in the community and things like that. We really need to think about how we can lessen that burden for students, how we can have students contribute to their own education in ways that are not financially coming out of their pocket, right? How can we connect them to greater resources and things like that? And I know that's happening. I know it's happening in Edwardsville. I know it's happening in Carbondale. I know we're working on ways across the system, and we're now trying to work on ways at the medical school to figure out ways to help because of some of the policy changes at the national level in terms of student loans and stuff like that for professional education. but we need to continue to have those conversations and dialogues and change policies as the educational environment change in terms of that. So to me, those are just some of the points and some of the things that we really need to think about. But we also need to do more of what they're doing in Edwardsville, and that's really using the data to inform what we do. We need to be more data driven. We don't need to dehumanize. We need to become more humanistic, but also more data driven. What are these numbers? What I think Dr. Caldwell said this in reference to what Dr. Patterson was talking about. What is really working, and shouldn't we be investing more in what is really working? And I think policy-wise, similar to what Edwardsville has done and has seen results, is investing in what is working, right? And it's time out, as my mom used to say, it's time out for saying we don't have the resources to do it. We need to find those resources to do the things that we know are working and replicate those things. And I think across the system, we'll start to see greater success.
Yeah. And you know, I want to thank you, Dr. Burnside, because one of the things I know about you is, again, you've been at Carbondale for 21 years. So when you speak from a place of context. You speak from a place of expertise, right? You know what's going on. And I qualify that to say you also can bring up the challenges. So I think it's important. I want to talk for a moment because I don't want Mr. Wendell Williams coming after you as he talk about the 15 to finish, right? I was a director for Complete College Georgia at one point, and I know what 15 to finish does. But what you said that I think is so important, as we recruit students who might need more time, then that's a disservice, right? As we talk about 15 and 4, like that is a disservice. But if we look at the data in other places, 15 credits per semester, 30 credits per year, 120 credits in 4 years, that's going to get you across the finish line and help you graduate. But that is not the model for all students. And I also want to point out the fact that you also being very successful in helping students attend medical school. You know, some of those rigorous classes, you can't take 5 and 6 classes a semester if you're trying to get an A in organic chemistry, right? To get into medical school. That is not going to be the best plan. So also it depends on what majors are students trying to get into it. It depends on, as Dr. Patterson talked about, what type of academic preparedness have they had before they entered into one of our campuses, and what can we do to, in some ways, compensate for what might have been lacking, because we want to do everything we can to make sure that student reaches their academic goals, right? So, and part of that might be, and let's slow down here. Let's not focus on 15 to finish. Let's just focus on finishing. We don't want to lose you in 2 years, right? That's not our part of our plan. So I want to thank you for providing that context, but you can't do that if you don't know your students, if you don't know what their goals are, if you don't know, again, how to help them get to that next step. And you've been able to do that. And I know that for a fact because I've met your students and they talk about how you've been able to help put them back on track. So thank you for that. And thank you for shedding light into that conversation. Father Brown, I want to ask you, and I also want to ask Dr. Patterson too about changes. We've talked a lot about advising. We talked about how we see our students, we respect our students, we support our students. We feel the same about our advisors, right? You started only early on as an academic advisor. And my question is, what can we do to better support our advisors across campus? You've highlighted some of the challenges, you highlighted their caseload. If you all can share, what are some of the things that SIU can do to come along aside our advisors and really help strengthen them so they can strengthen our students?
The first thing to do is to ask them what they need.
Yeah.
And if they need more help, then we hire more people. If they need more training, then we give them the opportunity to be trained without them having to pay for it. How do we help and I think that our advisors, we should also give them the opportunity to explain to the faculty what they expect from the faculty, because otherwise they're sending their innocent children into the lion's den. And that's not good either. And that's going to give me the last thing I'm ever going to say in any of these conversations of understanding, because you know I just never like to talk too much. Here are the other 2 policy changes. I would like to see, when we're doing job searches for faculty, to ask them whether or not they have had any pedagogy training. Because the difference, and I've got people quoting it to me now, the difference between being a teacher and a professor. And the other thing I would make a requirement at every university in this country is that every graduate student has to take at least 2 classes in pedagogy, in teacher training, because they're trained to be scholars, to write that 300-page dissertation that Dr. Burnside had to read today, but they're not necessarily trained on doing the things we're talking about in this conversation because they only see the professor up there doing it, and that's how they think that's supposed to be when they take over. And if we don't, I was lucky in my priesthood training, we had to get certified to be teachers. I don't know people who would have to be that to be teaching on a college campus. If you got the charisma, if you got the genius, if you got the skill set to do it, great. But that's not what you're going to be rewarded for because all research institutions is research, teaching, and service. Teaching is not primary, and we're going to have to make it more and more primary. And we're going to have to also say, if you don't have a stable family life, we're going to find something here for you to have a stable, psychologically safe space. But teacher training, and asking the advisors what they need. It's really quite simple. And if they tell us we need more people on to be advisors, then we got to hire some.
Absolutely. And what you just highlighted is what our students need, we need as well, right? Faculty, staff, advisors, we need it as well. And I do hope that the appropriate people are listening because we have acknowledged over and over again that one of our weaknesses across higher ed is the lack of pedagogy and training in higher education, in doctoral programs, and how that is a hindrance when people come in and they got to take a couple of years to figure it out. While you're figuring it out, students are suffering, right? And we don't want students to suffer. So yeah, thank you for that. And again, that is something that should be changed and transformed at a national level. I'm going to give the last word to Dr. Patterson, and we want to thank those who have joined us for YouTube. We know that this has been a thorough conversation, so at this time we didn't have any questions, and so we wanted to continue with some of our prepared questions. But before I close out, Dr. Patterson, any words of wisdom as we continue this student success work?
Yes, I just wanted to add to what Father Brown is talking about in terms of this support for academic advisors. There are about 3 major challenges I think that limit advisors' impact. One is the poor visibility into student needs throughout the term. Another one is lack of alignment across departments. And the third one is low student engagement. Effective academic advising programs really depend on advisors connecting with the students at the right time with the right information. We have some analysis that show that without visibility into which students are in need, advisors typically engage with about 25%, only about 25% of highly vulnerable students within the term. We often find that advisors use most of their time helping students who are often better prepared for college and usually in less need of the help because those students are most likely to persist typically, and they seek services on their own. And that keeps advisors' calendars full, especially around peak advising times. And it limits the capacity to impact the more vulnerable students. And that's a problem that we face, all the time. Most advisors don't have access. We were talking about that early warning system being so important. If faculty, particularly for first year students, because that's a critical period, if faculty are giving assignments early and reporting progress around those assignments early, and if that information is coming from across the university, it's so helpful. Most advisors don't have access to the information they need to monitor students that are at risk. So, when this is the case, at best, the advisors are limited to less effective generalized approaches or reactive intervention. And at worst, the limited information advisors get from this the system being disconnected means that vulnerable students can fall through the cracks. And so that's something I'm very, very passionate about is early information from all facets of our university faculty community is so helpful. And also give advisors a seat at the table as, you know, we're talking about making any processes and changes that impact academic advising so that they can provide feedback as well.
No, absolutely. We definitely need to empower and allow people to exercise agency. As we've highlighted some of these issues, for us in the room, as well as those who are listening, this is not the last conversation. We want to focus on this issue. We want to strengthen advising across SIU campuses. And one of the best ways I thought we can start this is by getting the experts in the room who could identify the challenges and who can also share the success. So to Father Brown, to Dr. Patterson, to Dr. Burnside, thank you so much for your, not just your wisdom, for your work, for your deep commitment, for your love, and for your care. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you. I want to thank those who have joined us via YouTube. And again, this is to me like the epitome of professional development, not just internally, but externally. I'm going to be sharing this so people can get these rich nuggets that we've been able to hear and learn about today. I also want to, again, encourage you to join our next conversation of understanding, which will be Wednesday, November 12th at noon. And this particular topic will be protecting our peace, mental wellness, and community care in trying times. So we'll be having our expert counseling staff join us and talk about this important conversation. So enjoy the rest of your day. And again, thank you for joining us today.